Chapter 4, Nutrition for Health Promotion. Basic physiological functioning. So the body needs different types of nutrients in order to function or in order to have energy. We're going to start with essential nutrients, and those are required for the body to function. So those are things that the body can't make on its own, but when a human takes in those nutrients, it can help the body grow. And those would be some vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, and amino acids. Non-essential nutrients improve health, but aren't required to basically function. Macronutrients provide energy to the body in large amounts. And that would be carbs, fats, proteins. And sometimes it could include alcohol. So it's the main source of energy for the body and provides energy and material for tissue growth and repair. Micronutrients are also needed for normal body functions, but only in smaller quantities. And they can result in severe health consequences if a person is lacking too much in the micronutrients. And then other nutrients for normal functioning, that could be water, electrolytes, sodium, chloride, potassium. Dietary patterns are formulated by the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. They review scientific material every 5 years, and they modify what is a good diet for average people to have. So they have dietary guidelines based on food groups, and that would be grains, fruits, vegetables, low-fat dairy, and protein. All of the guidelines written by the USDA are evidence-based. They're informed by policies. They are informed by research, and they're intended for the audience to understand it. So it's intended for lay people to understand what the proper diet would be, which is why instead of just talking about all the nutrients people need to take or take in and how much, they put it into the 5 food groups because it's better for people to visually see it. Many Americans don't take in the appropriate amount of fruits and vegetables, so the USDA has dietary guidelines, and that's basically to look into balancing the caloric intake and thinking about maintaining a healthy weight and healthy BMI. So Americans are becoming more and more overweight and more obese, and that can lead to many different health complications. You probably have heard the slogan, breast is best, when it comes to giving a baby nutrition. However, we do know that babies can take in other forms of nutrition. But if possible, then breast milk would be best for that baby, if possible. But the other babies are still healthy. So it's an excellent way to provide nutrition for a newborn. All newborns, the American Academy of Pediatrics wants all newborns to be fed only breast milk for the first 6 months, and that's when possible. And breastfed babies have lower rates of many infections and diseases later on in life, and that's been based off evidence-based research. Dietary intake. So when we think of this, we think of behaviors that influence what people eat. So many things influence what people eat. It could be your family, it could be the environment that you live in, it could be your own thoughts and beliefs about what you eat. So intervention programs target individuals' dietary behaviors, but they can also, and public health, they also will target other levels of the socio-ecological model. But dietary intake can be tracked by that person taking notes of what they eat. So it could be like for a week, it could even be for 30 days. And that way the person and their doctor can determine what's best for them. Dietary records for the imperfect gold standard would be a 3 to 7 day diary. Just think about all the foods and beverages that are consumed during that time. There's a 24-hour dietary recall. Sometimes though, when it comes to like the burden, individuals might feel like it's too much work. Maybe they're really busy, so they don't write down everything. Or some people have an issue recalling what they ate. for that prior day or for that prior week if they don't write it down continuously. So obviously, if it's self-reported answers, it's not always 100%, but it can give us an idea of what people are eating. Also, when it comes to unhealthy eating, people tend to have confirmation bias, so they want to look good, so they're going to display that they're eating less healthy. They're eating less unhealthy foods and eating more healthy foods than they actually might be. But there's the food frequency questionnaires and the brief dietary assessments that are available for dietary records. There's also apps and websites you can go to help with dietary records. Factors that influence dietary behaviors, as seen on the SEM. Individual characteristics, so it could be what people already believe. It could be related to cost of the healthy foods, since we know healthy foods cost more than unhealthy foods. And people that live in lower income areas, their food actually costs more, certain foods do, than those that live in healthy areas. That's based off of research. Then there's community level differences in access to healthy foods. So what is in your neighborhood? Do you actually have a health food store in your neighborhood or a farmer's market, or is it really far? And that brings into transportation and how much time people have to shop, or if there's buses available. And then also there's cultural differences in food preparation, so that should be taken into account. So it has been noted that certain immigrant groups, when people migrate here, their health is better than when they've been here for some years, and that's because they end up assimilating and adopting the American diet more so, and so they become less healthy than they were from their country of origin. On the individual level, there's psychosocial, biological, and lifestyle. So you can think of how much the person works, if they have kids, how do they feed their kids, what do they think about those things. Biological, that would be how their body already is. Were they born healthy, or were they born with a pre-existing condition? And psychosocial is, you could think about emotional eating or how they deal with stress. Some people have that tied to eating, their thoughts and beliefs when it comes to eating. Some people don't feel like, if they eat or drink a certain amount, that it's really going to affect them as much as it actually may. So when we think of individual level influences, we can look at age, gender, ethnicity, as far as like cultural norms and finances. Psychosocial influences will be the knowledge of knowing appropriate food sizes, serving sizes, how many calories to take in, how many fruits and veggies people should eat, how much protein someone should take in. Also, the perceived risk of a disease. So does a person feel like they're at risk of developing heart disease one day or type 2 diabetes? Also, some intervention methods will look at somebody's physical appearance and appeal to that. Some of the commercials you'll see even will appeal to that. Self-efficacy. So how much does a person believe they have control over what they eat? Do they think they could make the changes? Do they think that they can understand reading the label on a box to understand the calories? Are they able to understand this on a menu? Are they able to understand and factor in how much they should eat for whatever their health goals are? Also, what does food mean to them? Is it a time where they spend time with family when they eat? Do they eat while they watch movies? Is the TV part of that situation as far as family dinners? Do people eat a certain amount during holidays? So it depends on the meaning of food. A group I've studied, Melanesians, for them when it comes to food, it's more so as something to take in for energy. It's not this cultural sit around, have food and laugh and drinks and memories together like what we do with certain holidays in the U.S. For them, it's just you need a certain amount of energy to survive and to keep going throughout the day, so that's how they take in food. And the way meaning is placed on food, that's going to have an impact on how people view it and behave with it. And food preference, of course, many people like things that are sweet or comfort foods that are soothing, and those might not always be the best for us. Lifestyle influences. So someone's dietary behaviors are influenced by how their life is. As I mentioned before, if the person works a lot or they don't have a lot of time to cook for themselves or their family or to prepare food, people will grab fast food if they have certain jobs that value work output versus the person. Then people might skip lunch or snack all day um, just so their work output is at a certain level. The price of different food choices, especially when the price of foods are increasing, and people just don't have enough money to go around, so they're going to pick what's cheaper, and that's usually the foods that have more sugars and more fats and that aren't healthy for us. Culture, I mentioned this already, that people who migrate here usually are healthier, and then when they're here for a certain amount of time, that tends to change. There's been studies done for decades, and there's still more studies to fully understand this, but they definitely, as far as research goes, they look into this when it comes to people from Hispanic origin countries. Autonomy, so especially when it comes to adolescents, they have autonomy. They can maybe drive their own car or hang out with their friends longer, and usually that means that they're going to grab fast food or, walk to somewhere close versus going to the store and cooking. So measuring individual level influences on dietary behaviors. It's important to look at knowledge assessments, but where people are able to tell you what they ate during a certain amount of time. However, we have to look at the age of the person. Are they able to make the food for themselves, or is someone giving it to them? How well can they understand a label? And then how much of their disease has an impact on them and their current health. So there are scales that you can use, like the NHANES study looks at dietary behavior. So some people use those scales and measure it against the current community that they're looking at. And they also use the questionnaires. And then also you could look at somebody's behavior and see and observe them in their normal habitat or their normal daily life and see what they choose when it comes to food. Or maybe go with someone shopping and see what they go to versus what they should go to. Some coaches will actually go with the person to teach them to make sure that they know how to read the labels and to know what's good for them and what may not be good for them. For different interventions, print materials are always good. Materials with pictures showing examples of common foods that culture eats. Of course, having the appropriate language that the person can understand. Making sure serving sizes are understandable. There's the My Plate website, and it'll have an actual plate on the website and show you the actual sizes that your food should be, the portionality. So the USDA has many recipes that people can look up. There's apps that give you recipes. People now can use AI. And then chat features to ask it to look up recipes for them depending on the foods that they have available or how healthy they want to be. But just know that people don't really make changes based on print material alone. Like, they might read it or put it to the side. Or they might not have it readily available. So people usually need a little bit more when it comes to that. Counseling. Counseling can be extremely effective when targeting people on the individual level. So it increases the likelihood of dietary change. It helps people monitor their progress. It teaches them how to make progress. It provides social support. It builds their self-efficacy. And it could train them to maintain healthy eating in a variety of settings. So you could think of if they're having a potluck at work, like, they will know exactly what to choose. Or when they go shopping for themselves or for family members, or when they go out to a restaurant, they'll know which parts of the menu to look at and other parts which to cancel out. And they also will learn behaviors to help them avoid the negative foods. Taste preferences. So as adults, usually they can get around this or put things in a shake or a smoothie, take vitamins. But when it comes to children, children take their cues from adults. Adults are the biggest influence. So it's really good to have healthy eating targeting the children, but also having the adults involved and getting the children highly involved, and some school programs have used some farm to table activities or like community gardens or children and planting fruits and veggies or fruit trees and then eating it as a class. And if they see their peers eating it and them, they get to try it and they have a part in it, it actually makes them enjoy it more. So those are really great ideas as far as efforts for children on the individual level. Self-monitoring is very important, as mentioned before, with the self-efficacy, so people could look at their dietary intake, write it down. They can look at it over time, see the changes they have made. They can do a drastic change or go little by little. Um, they can constantly have this positive feedback loop where they look at the changes that they have made and how far they've come. Maybe they have certain health goals like no longer having type 2 diabetes, or maybe they want a certain waist size that would be healthier for them. So it's also important for them to have checklists before they go into the grocery store. So they're not buying a lot of things just because they're hungry, things that they maybe don't need, or maybe something that's quick for them to eat. They have planned meals ahead of time. So some people would do a lot of meal planning and, meal prep for the week, and then maybe store it in the freezer so that way they can take it out later. But it's something that's already pre-made and it's healthy and they know it's good for them. I know, especially as teenagers or people in college or just people who work out a lot, they'll do that just to keep themselves on track and it saves time later. And the counselors can go over the laws with them, help them review it, make sure they're on the right track. Nutritionists can also help with this, and their doctors. When it comes to targeting individual level influences, it's important to get the individual and to get them to change their behavior, but it's also important to realize that it's not just the individual person that has to be addressed. It's the people or things that influence them. Everyone's influenced by somebody who's around them. It could be their role models, peer pressure, a social setting, and so those need to be addressed too. And also those that don't have control over their diet. They don't buy the foods for themselves. They don't prepare the foods for themselves. Interpersonal level influences on dietary behaviors would be friends, family, acquaintances, people at work, just people that you interact with commonly. So a direct influence would be how parents might have to prepare the food for the children. So the children intake what the parents give them. An indirect influence would be where a friend chooses to go have lunch at, and then you might just have to pick from whatever's on the menu. Social support is very important, that we mentioned before. It's emotional, showing love, care, informational, giving someone advice, giving them information on healthy eating, instrumental, so maybe paying for their food at a farmer's market or taking them to a farmer's market. An instrumental or appraisal would be giving them positive feedback for eating healthier or making positive changes. So this could be direct or indirect. Direct could be cooking someone a healthy meal. Indirect could be praising somebody for creating their own healthy meal that has a fabulous taste. Social norms and social networks. So it is important to also look at who the people are around, what the culture is where they're around, and just take that into account. What does society value? So when I was younger, of course, they had the Big Mac meal, or the extra value meals is what they had, extra large meals, and people would just say, make it extra large. And, you know, part of policy was to change that and take away all those options. And that did help. People will get what's available to them, and a lot of those drinks are addicting, so it's just going to make people go back more and more, and then they're going to associate the sugar from that drink with that meal, so they're going to keep going back to that fast food place. So just know that whatever the culture is, whatever is normal, people do fall into that and do have peer pressure. Family has the biggest impact on healthy eating. Is just who you live with. So a direct influence would be sharing meals together as a family, so everyone's eating the same thing. So if someone needs to adjust their diet, then it's better if the entire household adjusts their diet in some way. An indirect influence would be what is brought home, so you can only choose from that. So if someone's bringing a lot of snacks and they're easy to get to, then a child might reach for that sugary snack versus the bananas. It just depends on the child's taste and what they have probably seen the parents eating, or maybe their friends eating, or even what they see on TV. So mass media plays a huge role in this too. But mothers have the longest and most impactful influence on dietary behaviors. And that starts with, of course, after the child is born, and if the mother is breastfeeding, or what the mother is usually giving the child. So measuring interpersonal level influences, it's similar to individual level. So thinking about questionnaires to know how often people are eating certain vitamins, nutrients, minerals, seeing how often they do eat, how often they don't eat. So questionnaires, or observing them, direct and indirect behaviors from family members. So looking at people at meal times, looking at what they buy when they go shopping, and then social support, who they are around, what they are around, what they hear, what they see, what's served, in their schools even, what's served around work, and what are those people actually eating. Interventions for interpersonal level influences. So it's important to have social support, and community health workers are very important. So first, the people have to have access to community health workers, hopefully in their neighborhoods, and they could help by focusing on what is already available in the area as far as community gardens or farmers markets, and helping the people learn, attain the knowledge for eating healthier and making dietary changes. And then also, of course, maybe they could be a source of getting funding to bring publicity, or to hopefully end up with certain stores or grocery stores, or just increasing the availability of certain fruits and vegetables for a community. And these are often delivered in a group format. It could be group counseling, or support groups where families come together and learn from one another, hear each other's stories, share meal ideas. Even an online support group can be helpful with this. Targeting interpersonal influences. So you have to know that these are modifiable, so it can be changed and modified depending on where people are at that moment, where that actual community is with their health, and then knowing who to target. So do you target the parents? Do you target people that, stay-at-home moms, or stay-at-home parents? Do you go to the schools and talk to the administrators so there's healthier food options for the children? Do you make sure there's healthier food options at the hospitals and community centers? So just think about what's important and who the target should be. Organizational level influences on dietary behavior. So there's the physical environmental influences, and that's when people have access to healthy foods or unhealthy foods. And you have to think about, do they actually have areas to eat, like appropriate areas to eat? Do they have cafeterias and break rooms that are clean? Do they have a designated kitchen area, or is it just table and chairs? Because if there's a kitchen area, then people can come to work and cook, or heat up some food that they've already pre-made. But if there's nowhere for them to go, they might just have to buy some fast food that's nearby. Is it a high school that allows off-campus food, which is usually fast food? And then the social environment, those have influences too, and it thinks about a culture's organization. So that's usually, thinking about social norms reflects the culture, and like, what do people think about healthy eating? Are there posters around for people to see that display healthy eating? Do people have enough time during lunch break to get food or actually eat properly? Or do they just have time, 5-10 minutes, to grab something quick and then scarf it down? The influence on schools on dietary behavior. So it's just very important. This started in 1995, the School Nutrition and Dietary Assessment. So they're measuring the quality of meals. And it's basically looking into the fact that beverage companies, companies that sell chips, candy, sodas, snack companies, they a lot of times give financial incentives to schools, and the trade-off is for them to sell these snacks and vending machines, knowing that kids will, get hooked on these things. Um, so it's important to look into that, but then also know that if that contract is broken, then the school might not have access to the money they need, and this is usually an issue for just public schools. So just think about the health risk and the financial risk also for the school. And then child care centers and adult centers um, have guidelines for what they should be feeding the children and the adults. Um, and hopefully they're actually following that. And they're getting money through the government in a lot of these places to help follow what's for the USDA. On an organizational level, of course, there's self-reports, just as with the prior two levels. They can have an environmental food audit where people come in and assess the physical food environment of the organization. They could look at places for food storage, check break rooms and cafeterias, count the number of, veggies that were served. They can measure plates before and after people eat. There's a lot of things that they can do. They can also have incentive programs for people maintaining a certain positive health status, or for people meeting certain goals. And if people meet a certain amount of goals or a certain percentage of the company, then the company might decrease the amount that comes out of people's paychecks for health insurance. So those are incentive programs, or they give out gift cards. Targeting organizational level influences. So usually schools, hospitals, work sites, community centers are targeted just to make sure that there's a healthy environment, because you can reach a large amount of people and then change the culture of those organizations, and so it becomes a social norm. Community level influences on dietary behavior. So you can think about the environments of where people live. Do they have access to healthy foods, or do they have access to quality foods? Are the health foods affordable, or is it hard for people to get to? It just depends on the community that they live in. So people look at grocery stores just to see how much health foods are available to people and then how much they cost versus other places. And then people have energy dense foods, and those are communities that live in like a food desert. And that's either where they don't have the proper grocery stores or any grocery stores in an area, or they have energy dense foods, which are the snacks and unhealthy foods that we eat, just because they might have corner stores available to them and they might not have cars. And then also looking at zoning, so where people live, how much the houses cost, and people usually live pretty close to where they work. So if it's a low income area, then usually they're getting paid low. And usually in those areas, the food that they have access to is of low quality. So it all goes hand in hand. So there are some protections that help as far as urban planning, farmland protection, food policy councils, stores, farmers markets, and just making sure that farm to table or farm to institution services are available to help. It's very important to measure community level influences, and it's good to look at the amount of fast foods in the area compared to the amount of grocery stores in an area, and look at food security or food insecurity. So some people don't have enough food to last the month, or they don't have appropriate or quality foods, so they have insufficient nutrition. And so there's audit tools from the NCI and the CDC. As I previously stated, there's disparities in access to healthy food items. So there are lower quality foods in areas with less money, and higher quality foods in areas with more money. People have more grocery stores per capita versus those in higher income areas versus those in low income areas. There's also more farmers markets and more options as far as juicers and places where you can go for healthy smoothies, versus people that live in low income areas that don't have access to that. They have liquor stores, corner stores, fast food options, and that is, of course, done on purpose as far as communities go. Uh, that's even seen in, Louisville. If we look at the West End, it's definitely a food desert. There's insufficient food, lower quality food, lower, just lower quality restaurants, if they even have actual restaurants versus fast food restaurants. And people have to travel further, of course, to actually reach a grocery store. And then you look at the foods in a Kroger in the West End versus foods in a Kroger on the East End or further out. You will see that there's differences in quality. If you go in the stores and look at the bananas and other fruits and vegetables, it's just a lot of studies have been done on these things, and there's just disparities by income. Targeting community level influences, so that's implementing change at the community level. That is reaching out to organizations, community health workers, people who are involved in public health, reaching out to city organizers, people who are trying to make a difference, as far as grassroots approaches, so people from those neighborhoods in their own areas trying to make a difference by having community gardens, and maybe trying to contract and have farmers come out to their area, or where they could even take a bus, churches, food programs, just to make sure people have access to healthier foods. Policy level influences on dietary behavior. So federal policies would be across the nation. There could also be state policies and local policies, by county or city, but it can encourage healthy consumption. Making changes with the USDA dietary guidelines, making changes with SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children Program, just to make sure people have access to healthy foods and try to decrease the barrier of cost for people. And then also, as part of the Affordable Care Act, it mandated that restaurants had to put the calories for foods on menus. So that helps people when it comes to choosing what to eat. So just looking at things like that, policies can be helpful. And as I mentioned before, grassroots approaches, so activism, lobbying from people from the community, since they will know what's needed and what's missing. So they should be part of the advocacy and part of the changing of the laws. There's also food banks that could be accessible to people, but hopefully the food banks will be there for more than just occasions or emergencies. It just depends on what people have access to. If certain restaurants are able to give food away, if the company's policy allows that, if the state or the area allows it. Also having the U.S. Farm Bill, so making sure that people are able to give food away, and then to just make sure that there's more access to healthier foods in areas. It could be rural areas where people don't have a lot of people living next to them, and then also in food desert areas or low income areas. Measuring policy effectiveness, so this could take years, or it could be looked at as a national level, the amount of people that are obese or the amount of people that have diabetes or heart disease. People can also, look at things on a state level. They can look at how many kids have a certain health issue. They can even look at cavities for kindergartners who are eating at school. Look at health issues or gastrointestinal issues for kids that are on SNAP or parents receive WIC. So it just depends. There's a lot that can be done to make changes, because once you change the policies, it can eventually change the culture. And once the culture is changed, then families change and individuals change. But all of it is tied together. And that's what I love about public health, is that it looks at things at a macro level and then also a micro level. So you're trying to reach all the levels to get to positive change for people.